At the beginning of the movie, is shown a murder committed by a psychopath. After shooting the victim to death, the perpetrator is not satisfied, then kicks the victim several times. The bullet casings fired by the perpetrator are taken back, then the victim's body is closed. And this is Joe Reacher. Then we are introduced to the actor as the main character in this movie. He is Jack Reacher, played by Alan Ritchson, a former military policeman who has just arrived in the city of Margrave, Georgia, America. When he is about to enter a tavern, a man looks angry to his girlfriend. For Jack, such acts do not respect women. No need to act more, and Jack just stared at the man. At that moment the man immediately apologized. Entered the shop and a cup of coffee and food was immediately served to him. Just about to taste the food, suddenly police cars appeared to surround the shop. Jack had looked around the shop but no one was suspicious. That means the policeman intended to arrest him. Feeling no guilt, Jack did not put up a fight when the police arrested him and brought him to the police station on suspicion of murder. A policewoman named Roscoe collected data on his identity. Jack did not want to speak at all, even though did not want only mentioned his name. Apart from a passport and $200, the police found an award medal in his trouser pocket. The head of the detective, Oscar Finley, conducts direct interrogation of Jack. Finley read out the murder charges to Jack with evidence of a body found across the street, who died from a 9mm bullet shot, from close range to be exact, in the back of the head. The victim was a man in his 30s with a large body and even beaten to a pulp after death. The police had difficulty finding the victim's identity because of his swollen fingertips. Finley intends to call a lawyer, but Jack refuses because he doesn't feel like he killed anyone. Meanwhile, Roscoe finds something strange because she doesn't find Jack Reacher's identity at all on any social media, such as Facebook, Instagram, and others. The only records Finley held a note that both of Jack's parents had died and he had only one older brother who was 2 years apart in age. This former Marine once led the 10th Special Investigation Unit of the military police. Even though he once killed on duty, it does not mean that Jack is willing to commit murder again. According to his expertise, Jack suspects that the perpetrators of the murders from the bodies found by the police were carried out by 3 people. Knowing the type, armed with small caliber bullets of 9mm and 95 grains subsonic with silencers, this is not the first time the perpetrator has done this. A psychopath who likes to beat the victim's body. Finley was quite surprised by Jack's explanation. He could be called calm but smart. He didn't want his pride to fall. Finley still insisted that Jack matched the description of the person seen on the highway near the murder scene. Jack said that he came to this city to find out more about Blind Black, a blues singer who according to legend used to die in Margrave. According to the investigation, the victim died at 12:00 at night. If it is proven that Jack was still on the bus at that time, he is free from all charges. What the police are currently doing is investigating the phone number found on the victim's shoes from a piece of paper that says Pluribus. The story of teenage Jack and his sister is shown here. When their people invite them to occupy a new house, several teenagers in the city are not happy with their arrival. Jack and his sister are kicked and even pushed. There is no word of giving up. There is only one word, that is fight back. He only could lay down in his cell. Roscoe kindly offered him a cup of coffee. According to her experience, Roscoe felt Jack had done nothing wrong. The behavior of a criminal could be read the first time she saw it. There was no indication and evidence that led if Jack was murderer. From the telephone number found on the victim's shoes, Finley went to a house owned by Hubble. Strangely, Hubble was frightened when he saw a suspicious car opposite his house. Without thinking about defending himself, Hubble admitted that he was the perpetrator of the murder. It was strange that Hubble did not know the identity of the victim and the motive for the murder he had committed. Because of his confession, Hubble was taken to the police station and thrown into prison and in the same cell as Jack. With Hubble's confession, Jack was released from the jail. Because of that, the cable that tied his hands he released by himself. Actually, Finley still doubts Paul Hubble's confession. With his profession as a banker who working in Atlanta, there is no history of crimes he has ever committed. Jack actually wanted to leave immediately, but Finley prevented him. Here Jack showed again his abilities. He could guess if a member of Finley named Stevenson had a relationship with Hubble from their eye contact that Jack saw. It turns out that Stevenson's cousin is Hubble's wife, and Jack can guess if Finley is a stubborn person and Harvard graduate who has just got divorced with his wife, but hopes to reconcile. Jack can tell that Finley is trying to get rid of his habit, that is smoking. To prove his point, Finley calls Stevenson. Sure enough, that last night Hubble and his wife were at a party until 2 p.m., and he was sure Hubble was nowhere near the scene of the crime. Finley changes his mind. Jack and Hubble will be placed in a prison to find out the real culprit. Arriving at the prison gate, officers greeted their arrival. Jack and Hubble will be placed in a prison cell far away from other inmates. According to regulations, their clothes must be removed and replaced with special clothes for convicts. Here, Jack refused to open his pants because it was not in accordance with constitutional, no suspicious grounds. This officer forced him to do it. Jack dared to try it. If the officer wanted to be beaten, the two of them then were placed in a cell, with a height of 195 centimeters. It was visible that Jack's legs could not fit in his bed. Shortly, in the morning, Jack came out of his cell. It turned out that their cell was in the neighborhood of permanent convicts who received life sentences. Certainly, there would be problems that would come their way. Then 3 inmates appeared who forced Hubble to give up his shoes and glasses. Not only that, this violent convict intends to take off his pants. Can you guess what he will do to Hubble? For this deed, Jack could not let it. He got off his bed, gave a warning to the 3 of them to leave. On the count of 3, did not want to follow what Jack said. This is what he did, funny and cool at the same time. In that prison field, Hubble revealed a fact. If he was just a financial manager who was forced to help his bosses with financial schemes, if he refused, he would be killed. Since being in that prison, Hubble did not want to be far from Jack, even when he entered the toilet. Even though he continued to be beside him, the second problem came again. This time 5 big people entered the toilet to get rid of Jack. Jack gave another chance to them to go on the count of 3. He had not finished counting. This is what happened. Jack managed to beat 5 people at once, even one of their eyes plugged in by Jack. Prison officials immediately came and were surprised to see Jack's toughness. Jack and Hubble should have been placed on the top floor, but instead they were placed in a public place. Back to Finley. Jack's words were true. Finley tries to contact Sharon to get him reconciled. Soon after, Roscoe brings Reacher's military history list that she got from Washington, D.C. Jack is a West Point graduate with a Silver Star, earning the Legion Soldier's Medal of Merit, Bronze Star Soldier Award Medal, 2nd Silver Star. Not only that, in a mission Jack went back and forth to save 12 of his comrades in an explosion. As a military policeman, Jack managed to solve 150 cases very well. Finley seemed wrong to imprison someone, felt annoyed. He opened his drawer to take back his cigarettes. Back at the prison, while enjoying breakfast, Jack already suspects Spivey's officers deliberately put them in the general population cell, on the orders of someone in power. Shortly, they are both released again. Hubble is picked up by his wife while Jack is picked up by the beautiful policewoman who idolizes him. Roscoe shows the video when Jack was on the bus on the night of the murder. This evidence confirms that Jack is innocent. Jack intends to leave this city, but, before that, Roscoe invites him to dinner. Before that, they also stop at a thrift store to buy clothes that, according to the contents of Jack's wallet, Jack took the time to walk in the middle of town and then entered the barber shop. A suspicious car was seen following him. The barber man told him about the Margrave City. A billionaire named Kleiner founded several elite companies in this city. The Kleiner Foundation he built helped fund the city. It turned out that the car that followed Jack belongs to Kleiner Jr. and his crazy cousin Dawson. Jack immediately goes to them asking what they want from him. Kleiner Jr. seems to already know about the case that happened to Jack, including his identity as a former military man. We don't know what his purpose is. They dare to threaten this former military police. Were they involved in the murder, including the attempted murder of Jack in prison? Why is Jack considered a threat for them? Back at the police headquarters, Roscoe informs Jack about finding another body with gunshot wounds from the same caliber bullet. Jack is invited to see the body. While listening to the autopsy results from the forensic expert about the victim's swollen hand, Jack feels there is something wrong. According to him, the first victim was allergic to latex. The perpetrator deliberately used polyvinyl protection to avoid blood DNA. The victims who experienced it triggered swelling of histamine reactions. The victim's dental treatment was arbitrary because the victim's place of residence moved. The victim's right arm was broken at the age of 8 and was treated in Berlin. And several other facts about the victim. Jack knew all of this because it turned out that the victim was his own older brother, namely Joe Reacher. When he was sad over the loss of his older brother, Finley still talked a lot and asked about Jack's intentions and purpose in coming to this city. Roscoe intervened in the argument between the two of them. Since then, Jack promised to kill all the perpetrators who were responsible for his brother's death. Roscoe is assigned to supervise Jack Reacher, who intends to investigate the perpetrators of his brother's killer. The two of them return to the Hubble house to seek clues from his wife. His biggest question: why did Joey Reacher have Hubble's phone number? Jack pretended to want to go to the toilet, even though he was looking for clues in the shoes room. From Hubble's shoes, Jack found a small seed that stuck. After that, two of them left again. Jack concluded that Hubble was part of the perpetrator's target. It was proven that while in prison, they were clearly targeting the currency expert. Now there is a possibility that Hubble is on the run or it was caught. The agrimonia seed found in this Hubble shoes was in the vicinity of the plant where Joe Reacher was killed, which means there is a possibility that Hubble was at the scene of the murder at the time of the incident. Shortly, the two of them returned to the place of the murderer. Jack tried to describe the situation that occurred at that time. According to Jack, one of the perpetrators was a reliable shooter. The reason was based on the second victim running in the dark, with a silencer that was difficult to accurately shoot, but the shot could be precise target. With his expertise and experience, Jack was able to describe Joe Reacher's position from the shot trail. During the incident 2 days ago, the moon was estimated to be 26 degrees further west. The perpetrator managed to shoot Joe Reacher while he was hiding in the dark in the bushes, revealed if Joe Reacher worked in the Department of Internal Security, which covers many things including terrorists, drugs, weapons, and borders. It is not impossible that this murder is related to Joe Reacher's job. Jack didn't know which division Joe Reacher was on duty, because it turned out that it had been a long time they never had spoken each other. Jack then went to a motel to rest. From a distance, Roscoe was still watching him. It turned out that 4 thugs who were around this motel were trying to disturb Jack. His instincts as a former investigator he never let go. He suspected that this group of thugs had been waiting for him all along, knowing from the 2 empty packs of beer around their car. They claimed to have been paid $100 by Kleiner Jr. to attack Jack. Jack actually didn't want to serve them, because they had dared to throw a bottle at him. This is what Jack did. In a second count, these 4 people were immediately defeated. Roscoe was shocked when she saw Jack's ability. That night was shown the 4 perpetrators of the murder entering a house complete with special clothes. In the morning, when he was about to continue the investigation, Jack saw a dog that looked thirsty. The owner admitted that he had given the dog a drink this morning, but Jack was not stupid. He saw that the dog's food was empty and dry with no trace. Jack was shocked when Roscoe told him that Morrison had been murdered at his house, had just arrived in front of Morrison's house. Jack already suspected that the police chief's body was hanging on the wall. Jack said the allegation was related to what he heard from Hubble while in prison. Hubble's superiors threatened to hang his body on the wall if he didn't want to carry out his orders. It was proven when he saw the body of the Morrison was really terrible, the actions of a very heinous psychopath. Jack suspected that Morrison and several police at the police office were involved in bribes with the perpetrators of crimes. Because Morrison did not want to do what they ordered, he was immediately killed. If they dared to kill the head of police, it is certain that these criminals are not ordinary people who have very strong influence. Therefore, he asked Finley and Roscoe to be aware of Stevenson's movements and Baker's. Jack and Roscoe returned to Hubble's house to confirm his condition. According to Jack's estimation, Hubble's position were unknown. His wife was very worried about her husband's safety. Roscoe decided to protect Hubble family while Jack borrowed Hubble's car to continue the investigation with Finley in the garage. Meanwhile, Jack had seen a bag that said Axis Financial Outing Golf. There was no gun. Even a penknife was enough for him to defend himself. Finley should have been appointed to become the chief of police, but strangely, Mayor Teal appointed himself to become the interim police chief. That means the mayor is also involved with these criminals, who are allegedly also bribed by them. Some residents seem unsure and pessimistic about this mayor. Besides giving innuendo to Finley as the chief detective who is incompetent with his duties, some residents question Reacher's arrival in this city. A well-known businessman named Kleiner, he made sure Reacher was not involved because his own brother Joe Reacher was a victim. With a bit of arrogance, Kleiner admitted that he had poured out a lot of money to rebuild this city, so he promised to spend more money to help the police to solve this case. After that speech, Finley asks the new chief of police for permission to conduct an investigation into this serial murder case, to find a pattern that the perpetrator is using. Teal aka Mayor pretends that he assumes the Morrison murders are not connected to the other murders. Therefore, Finley is assigned to examine old files on the most powerful criminals Morrison has ever arrested, then released or paroled. Jack assumes that if Kleiner was involved in this murder, according to him, people with lots of money and power are rarely clean-hearted and therefore need to be investigated. In front of the police chief, meanwhile Finley and Roscoe must show performance according to the directions, but, behind them, they are still working together to investigate the mastermind of all this. To protect the Hubble family, Finley will enlist the help of his friend Picard, an FBI agent on duty at the Atlanta branch. Finley is absolutely certain that Picard can be trusted. Besides having known him for years, he is also the one who gives him advice and says don't work at the Margrave. This gentle form of expulsion the mayor says to Reacher, if he's going to catch his brother's killer then it's Jack. Advised to return to his hometown. Jack refuses, and is determined to make sure the culprit is really caught dead or alive. After buying a cell phone, the barber man Mosley gives an information to Jack. If 2 Spaniards come to look for him, back at the Hubble house, Jack asks for Charlene aka Hubble's wife to immediately pack up to move to a safer location. With protection from an FBI agent friend of Finley, Charlene could not believe it. When Jack suspected Hubble had died, Jack reasoned that while in prison, Hubble had become their target. When he saw the bicycle, Jack recalled his childhood accompanied by Joe. He came to several children their age who were bullying a boy named Billy, almost got into a fight, until Billy's parents came. Jack had approached a suspicious car that suddenly appeared near the Hubble house. Jack rushed back inside to invite Charlene to leave immediately. Quickly, Jack grabbed Roscoe's gun. It turned out that it was Picard, an FBI agent who would protect Charlene and her children. Jack resumed his investigation by planning to meet the prison guard Spivey. Because he was one of the keys to this case, Jack pretended to call him on behalf of Chief Detective Finley. He invited the guard to meet at the Blue Cat. Because Jack Reacher was suing him for a case of the prison beating that night, Spivey already suspected that it was not Finley, but Jack. That's why he had prepared a countertrap for Jack. Two gunmen pointed guns at him and forced Jack into the trunk. Jack refused. Because the trunk was too small for a giant, it seemed. When their attention was focused on his babbling, this happened. Overwhelmed enough to fight these two men, until a policeman shows up to arrest them, Jack returns to the police station to receive treatment from Roscoe. From the fight earlier, Jack suspects the two men are military or ex-military originating from South America. Besides, they're using Spanish and a Glock 17 pistol, which is called the King's signature pistol. If normal thugs, in 10 seconds Jack would have beaten them. Roscoe gets an information that Joe Reacher works for the secret division. Finley's allegation is counterfeiting. Because Hubble specializes in currency management, all crimes related to drugs, weapons, and human trafficking will be money-related. After fixing the hole in his jacket and feeling better, Jack intends to resume his investigation by searching Spivey's house. Finley forbids it. Because Finley will be doing the job, Jack is asked to return to his motel. Being equally stubborn, Roscoe is reassigned to persuade him. Roscoe finally invited Jack to relax for a moment at a cafe, which is in Alabama. With non-formal clothing, Roscoe looks much prettier. They seem more familiar with each other, especially when they have to dance. Because of the heavy rain, they came home wet. While on their way home, the border officers stopped their car, preventing bad things. Jack prepared himself with his gun. It turned out that the officer told them to turn around. Because of the high rainfall, there was flooding and this highway was not worth going through. As a result, the two of them stayed at a motel. Because both of them were still awkward, they only confided in each other and there were no adult scenes. Roscoe admitted that she was raised by her father's friend, named Gray, after her parents died when she was a kid. As a police officer, Gray taught her all about police. Before he died, Gray often drank until he became depressed, maybe because he never married and had no biological children. And the unexpected incident when he was found hanging himself in his garage a year ago. One thing that Roscoe always remembers, Gray always gave Esther flowers on her birthday. In the morning, Jack accompanied Roscoe home. They were surprised when they saw the door was already open. Traces of damage from being forced was open. There was no one in it other than the words, "See you later." The criminals didn't play around and started to dare to target Roscoe. Because of that, this time, Jack really needed a weapon. Roscoe is shown, who is upset and angry because of the actions of the criminals who are now also after her. As a police officer who was recruited by the FBI and CIA, Roscoe is not at all afraid of them. At Jack's request, she shows a cool gun that was given to her by late Gray for her, and the gun was more suitable for use by Jack. Before leaving, Jack tried the weapon's capabilities. Arriving at the morgue, Jasper reported that the victim of the murderer was named Pete Jobling, a truck driver for the South Freight Expedition. Based on forensic results, there was a lot of hydrogen sulfide in the gas in his blood. There was never a criminal record, only traffic violations and resistance. But it gets weird when an elite law firm named Zacharias Perez LLP then helps the truck driver. Shortly thereafter, Roscoe got a call from Molly Beth Gordon, a Secret Service Administration employee based in Washington, D.C. When she heard Jack's voice, she thought it was Joe. Molly could not hold back her tears when she found out that her colleague and lover had died cause of killed. What she knew, Joe was investigating a secret mission. Joe's position was director of the investigation division, as well as head of the anti-counterfeiting section. The procedures he implemented succeeded in stopping many cases of domestic counterfeiting. Many companies trapped his devices. The target that Joe was after was international cases. Jack asked Molly for help to print the case files manually. If he left the digital files, it was feared that the perpetrators would drag him down. Also, whatever their crimes, they are all aimed at the money. And Hubble has a position as currency manager of Axis Financial in Atlanta. Finley will investigate in casual after-hours style, so he does not need court order. But, before that, he goes to the Spivey prison guard's house. Roscoe must return to base to find the ex-con who killed Morrison, so that the new ship will not suspect them. Arrived at headquarters, sure enough, this ship gave her the task of investigating ex-convicts who were actually not related to Morrison's death. Roscoe reasoned that she would investigate the rented car that the perpetrators might use. Stevenson asks where Hubble and his cousin are missing. Roscoe admits that she doesn't know where they are. She answers that because she is suspect Stevenson is involved in bribery with the criminals. Finley enters Spivey's house, which is outside Margrave. Unfortunately, a neighbor who saw the arrival of Finley felt suspicious, then reported it to the local police. The prison guard was not there, and when Finley did a search he found a cell phone. The last call on the cell phone was to the Kleiner Industry Company, but suddenly this happened. Meanwhile, Jack was assigned to meet Zacharias Perez to find out cases related to Jobling. Jack came to this elite lawyer's office to ask for a traffic violation file committed by Pete Jobling. This man did not want to give it even though Jack had insisted. He threatened to destroying his life with one phone call. Jack threatens to end his life with one phone call. This is the consequence if you dare to play with this man. Jack finally managed to get the file. Meanwhile, Finley had just been released from the Elton police detention cell after they realized they had caught the wrong person. With blood still flowing from his nostrils, Finley looked annoyed at the two policemen who beat him. Roscoe, who came immediately, picks up Finley, vents his anger on them, mistaking Finley for a thief. Finley thanks Roscoe for defending him, but condemning their actions is a sign of weak mind and character. The three of them gathered again at a diner. Jack got information if the boss of the dead truck driver was contracted by Kleiner Industries. The question, why did Kleiner pay attorney fees for the driver? With Finley's findings, if Spivey communicates with Kleiner, does that mean the Kleiner company is involved in counterfeiting with the resources and power they have? The potential for that to happen, and that's something they should investigate further. Jack plans to do it illegally, breaking into the Kleiner company to get evidence that they are most likely criminals. Finley disagrees with Jack's brutal way of doing it until the two of them argue and fight again. Roscoe returns to mediate between them. After making up again, Jack and Finley continued the investigation. In the middle of the trip, Jack took the time to give food to the dog, which he previously found was not given a drink. When the owner appeared, it turned out that he admitted that the dog belonged to his uncle who had died. He was only forced to accommodate the dog. This man also kicked Jack out of his yard. Supporting Jack's actions, Finley threatened a fine of $500 and 10 days in prison for being proven neglecting animals. Arriving at the Kleiner Industries company, the two of them did not see any CCTV cameras. It was seen that several workers were moving a large amount of animal feed. A woman then guided them to meet Mr. Kleiner. Upon entering the lobby, Jack noticed several displays of preserved animal heads. In conclusion, the Kleiners were great shooters. When meeting Kleiner, Finley asked for an explanation regarding the phone call Spivey made to his office. In addition, the late Pete Jobling was a former truck driver for Kleiner Industries. Finley asked for clarification and explanation of their relationship with Kleiner. The Richman of Margrave, aka Kleiner, then replied, "Nothing special. Pete is just an ordinary driver, and it is their responsibility to provide legal protection for workers, whereas Spivey, he suspects he may have friends in the company, so calls the office number." Finley is not satisfied with the answer. Kleiner feels insulted for being suspected after his sacrifice for this city was so great. Finley tries to hold back when he mocks Finley's lavish education at Harvard, only ends up being the local cop in this small town, not to mention that the townspeople don't appreciate it. Kleiner gives Finley unethical advice to close this case. Finley's patience has run out. He threatens to beat him with his own feet until his heart stops if Kleiner dares to dictate the investigation process, especially if it is proven that he is involved in this case. Hearing Finley angry, Jack just smiled sarcastically, so they were both forced to leave. When they left, Jack repeated Finley's words if swearing is a sign of weak mind and character. Jack was happy if Finley was much more aggressive. He believed Kleiner was a bad man who should know that they could be punished too. Jack thought back when two soldiers came to investigate the case of beating Curtis Bishop, a teenage perpetrator who bullied young children. Jack actually did it, but Joe claimed it to protect Jack. Joe did this because he loved Jack, as did Roscoe. Finley had to leave his house to find a safer place, because he didn't want his fate to be like Morrison's. When Roscoe came to Finley's house, Jack asked again because he felt it was odd that the amount of food stock that had come to Kleiner was so much more than the number of cows they had. Roscoe considered that it was still reasonable, because almost all Georgia residents have cows. Tomorrow, the three of them will occupy a motel to prevent threats from dangerous criminals. Tonight, Jack plans to find Spivey back in Blue Cat, or at least looking for clues to his whereabouts, because he is one of the keys to this case. Roscoe intends to go to shop for her needs. When she is about to back home, Kleiner Jr. is already waiting for her. Kleiner Jr. has followed where Roscoe is going and also who is close to Jack lately. He reminds Jack past while on duty in Baghdad, which killed innocent civilians. Because of his connections, Jack was released from the lawsuit, but the story never went away. He thought Jack Reacher was a murderer, and because of that, Roscoe didn't deserve to be around him, as if jealous. Kleiner Jr. said he would protect Roscoe. Roscoe didn't care about what he said and left immediately. At that night, Finley met a high-ranking Axis Financial where Hubble worked. Finley claimed his name was Steve. He was trying to gather information about Hubble's work. While enjoying her shooting, this woman told him that Hubble had left without notice a year ago and its currency division was disbanded. In essence, Axis Financial no longer has currency operations. Relaxing in a bar, a woman seems to be trying to approach Finley. Even though he is divorced, Finley admits that he cannot let go of his love for his ex-wife, and because of that, he feels that he is not the right person for her. Jack entered the Blue Cat. An old man was given money by Jack so that Jack could get information on Spivey's whereabouts. Had not had time to answer, came a burly former boxer who claimed to be a friend of Spivey, but he would not tell where he was. Wasted no time. Jack immediately taught him without resistance. People, it says that Spivey was brought in by the Spaniards in great haste. Jack drives back, but as he gets into his car, he sees a suspicious car behind him. Jack went back into the kitchen bar to get his gloves. After that, he left with drive his car. Arriving at a deserted location, Jack jumped out of his car and hid behind the grass. The two Spanish men then got out of the car looking for Jack's whereabouts, even though from behind, Jack shot them both dead. The gloves turned out to be used by Jack to cover up his fingerprints. The fallen bullet casings were taken back, including a wad of money taken from their pockets. Opening the trunk of the car, Spivey's body was found. Jack Reacher is shown putting the bodies of the two assassins into the trunk of a car and putting them together with Spivey's body. Because there is not enough space, Jack breaks both of his legs like a cow bones. After that, Finley contacted him to come to a location where a burnt car was found. Jack suspected that this type of SUV belonged to his brother. It was difficult to identify because no police license plate was found. Shortly thereafter, Roscoe arrives to help investigate the car. As the frame number is covered in burnt remains, Jack did an old military trick. The ketchup from the snacks brought contains acetic acid, which can be used if the Marines run out of gun oil. Salt for abrasion. The contents contained in it can also be used to clean metal. Finley will ask Picard for help, because Picard will identify faster than fake detectives. Then Jack tells of the assault that occurred, which was carried out by two South Americans against him, including the discovery of Spivey's body. Jack reasons it was in self-defense. Assisted by Roscoe, the bodies will be disposed of to prevent an investigation by the state police of the gunshot wound. Roscoe concluding Jack shot them from behind, not the front, as he had told Finley. Jack admits it was because he had the chance to kill them first and prevent them from falling. Roscoe remembered what Kleiner Jr. says, so she immediately asked Jack what was really going on in Baghdad. When he was tracking down the missing PFC, several young children played football in this former hangar every day. One day he feels like something wrong. The children not yet come home. When he checked, 3 local men there were harassing them. Absolutely, Jack did not remain silent. As usual, he gave them the choice to surrender to the local police or Jack would give the punishment. It turned out that night they came back, and that's when Jack shot all of them dead. He believes that Kleiner used his money to buy access and information for an obscure purpose. The bodies will be left at the airport, after destroying the CCTV cameras and tricking the officers. The car containing the 3 bodies was left in the airport parking lot. When he saw workers moving goods, Jack recalled asking Mosley, what business does Kleiner do? He answered trucks, real estate, and chemicals. But strangely there was no agriculture. The two of them then ordered a hotel room that was quite luxurious. The price didn't matter because Jack brought a wad of money from a hitman who tried to kill him. Besides his intelligence in uncovering a crime, Jack had the ability to use a toothpick used to clamp hinges the door, which he did to slow down any baddies who might have tracked them down. Shortly, Molly contacted Jack. If she was preparing the files Jack requested, to avoid enemy tracking, Roscoe asked Molly to use the train to the 5-point station tomorrow afternoon. Molly had revealed herself, and Joe had been in close contact for 2 years. For his colleagues, Joe is a role model because of his totality at work. Joe also tells about Jack that he has good grades, is very smart to the point that sometimes he is a bit annoying. Because of that, Joe respects Jack so much. Roscoe tries to console Jack, who is pensive again with Joey's death. In the morning, they focused on continuing their investigation into Pete Jobling's house. It turned out that the house they visited was the house of his parents. They didn't know if their child was dead. Maybe Jack didn't want to hurt them, so he reasoned that there was a series of hijackings in his trucking company, but Jobling wasn't involved. Jack just wanted to ask if Jobling could help with their investigation. Jobling's mother feels calm. Pete Jr. has not lived in this house for a long time. He lives with his wife in Brookhaven. It turns out that Jack deliberately lied so as not to show his emotional side, which he thinks is just a waste of time. Finley was summoned by the police chief because of the information he obtained. He had disturbed Kleiner. Teal said that if Finley threatened Kleiner, that Finley would beat up Kleiner. Because part of the person Kleiner bribed, the police chief would actually blame Finley's actions. because according to him, Kleiner was the person who respected in this city, the mayor's loud warning. Not fired, but Finley is assigned to investigate dozens of ex-convicts who have grudges against Morrison. Whatever he does must be based on Teal's approval, otherwise Teal will not think longer and will fire him from the police. Suddenly, Finley's father calls. Because there is something urgent, it turns out to be Picard. In coded language, he says 2S3B from his place in 1 hour. Finley asks about mother and children, meaning to Hubbles. Wife and children, are they all right? Picard gives the gun to Christie to prevent unwanted things. Picard promises he will only be gone for a few hours. Jack and Roscoe arrive at Pete Jobling's house. Luxurious for a truck driver, Judy admits that she does not regret her husband's death. She says because of the risk of bad work done by Pete, all she knows, her husband stole an air conditioner from Kleiner Industries in Miami. Several empty boxes were found in the garage. One thing Judy forgave from her husband, even though he is a criminal, but an expert in bed games. Not long after, Jack is contacted by Finley to go to the location given by Picard. While on the way, Jack suspects Jobling is taking care of counterfeit money for Kleiner. Jack concludes, money is produced in South America by the employers of the 2 people he killed, then sent to Florida. Assignment Jobling went there with the real air conditioner. The box was emptied and filled with counterfeit money, then it was brought back to the Margrave. That's the theory, and to be sure, it's in Joe's file. Brought by Molly. Arriving at the meeting point, shortly, Picard passed asking them to follow him, a scene trick so that they would not be followed by the enemy. Picard gave information about the burning car that belonged to a rental company named CV Equinox. According to him, it was a problem because the car tenant the name is Ron Hassey, the Yankees' backup name used by Joe. That means it's true, as they suspect. Picard then gives a motel address that was used by Joe. Jack has to memorize it, then the paper has to be thrown back to prevent tracking enemy. When they came to the motel, they were 20 minutes late, because someone had taken Joe's bag. Jack suspected that Joe would leave clues for him. Sure enough, a piece of clothing was found in a trash can that Joe deliberately threw away so that his younger brother would find the clues he left behind. From one of his pockets was a piece of paper that said Jobling's Garage, Kleiner Gray's file. But suddenly, Jack and Roscoe are attacked unexpectedly, then they are scattered. But the 2 assassins continue to chase Jack because they know Jack has a message. After their car got stuck, Jack managed to kill one of them. The chase continued. Jack managed to trap one more perpetrator, and both of them were involved in a fierce fight. Unfortunately, Jack was mugged again, but this is what happened. Roscoe shot this second perpetrator. Roscoe immediately slapped Jack. She was disappointed and worried because Jack deliberately diverted their attention to chase after him. Jack did that because he loved and cared about her. Finley suspected that the leak of the motel location because Stevenson knew about the conversation on call between Finley and Picard. There are many other possibilities, including Kleiner assigning someone to keep an eye on them. Jack finds surveillance equipment in Spivey's car. There is a possibility they used a satellite dish microphone, but Roscoe still doesn't believe that Stevenson is corrupt. Jack recalls his little story when he was reported for hitting a general's child. Even though it was self-defense, it seems the general has a grudge and would seek to demote their father, cut his salary and transfer from Okinawa to bad service in Germany. As a result, their father disliked Joe when it was Jack who did it. At that time, Joe said his instinct was to shut up and shut up. Gathered in a house, now they had to decipher the clues found from Joe's clothes, and this operation was called E pluribus unum. Some initials and telephone numbers were written on the paper, like PH, which means Paul Hubble. Then there's WB and SC. Jack admits that he led an investigation with the Air National Guard in Memphis. According to him, the area code JW901 there, Jobling's Garage, the Kleiner Gray file that they had searched, there was no clue there. They then divided the task of calling the telephone number listed on the paper. The telephone number Jack called was the American Environmental Protection Agency. While Roscoe got a tip that WB was William Bryant, an economics lecturer at Princeton, he would be back in 3 days from a conference in Europe. The same with Finley, who was directed to the Faculty of Economics in Columbia, and SC was Professor Stephanie Castillo, who going home 3 days from the same event. Jack will investigate the agency, because corruption agents at the federal level are more dangerous than lecturers. Jack then contacts an agent he really trusts to help with this investigation, her named Neagley, Jack's former employee. After telling the story of his brother's death, Jack asked Neagley to investigate the number of the EPA office in Memphis with the initials JW. After they went to the train station at the airport to pick up Molly, they saw Molly get off the train, but within seconds Molly was gone. Jack found Molly's bag in the rail area, but it was empty. While tracing the rails, he found Molly covered in blood. With Molly's death, the only clue to uncover this organized crime of counterfeiting money was lost. Will Jack be able to solve this case, to avenge the death of his brother and loved ones by Joe? Jack Reacher and the team continued their investigation after the accident that killed Molly. The counterfeit mafia was so highly organized that they were able to track down their informants who they were clearly trying to protect. The temporary conclusion they could draw was that the Margrave police were already corrupt, and still obvious, with the Atlanta or Georgia police, even the Federals have been infiltrated by bad officers. Jack asked the car to pull over, because seeing the condition of the dog that looked weak, Finley, who already knew the story, also got out of the car. It turned out that the chain that tied the dog's neck was too narrow. When the owner of this house appeared, Jack, who was annoyed, immediately hit him. They finally took the dog away. Roscoe could only smile seeing the cohesiveness of Jack and Finley, who had always fought before. They would send the dog to the shelter, and after that Jack would be taken to the Hubbell's house to get a new car, because the previous car he used full of bullet holes. Jack finally finds Hubbell's new car that is much cooler. Jack had stopped at Kleiner's ranch. Until now, he still wonders what Kleiner meant to buy cattle feed in very large quantities, exceeding the needs of the cows. When he was going back to the car, Jack found the same seeds that he found in Hubbell's shoes. That means, Hubbell had visited Kleiner's ranch. When he returned to the police station, Jack saw Roscoe cleaning her own car, which had been crossed out. Jack rushes off to plan to attack Kleiner Jr., who is in the restaurant. Jack taunts Kleiner Jr. as a spoiled fool for acting as a coward who dares to intimidate women and taking cover behind his father's wealth. When KJ insults Roscoe back as a bitch, and this has happened. Even though it was 3 against 1, Jack easily attacked them. Finley and Roscoe, who had just arrived, immediately drew their pistols, because KJ was pointing a knife. At the same time, Kleiner appeared to tell his son to calm down. Finley did not want to accept orders from Kleiner to expel Jack from this town, because Kleiner was not Finley's boss. Roscoe immediately took Jack outside, after a resident testified if he started the riot. Without going into details, Jack did this because he cares for Roscoe as Molly does for her sister. Shortly thereafter, Roscoe received a call from Teal that she was fired just because he said that Joe's car license plate matched the prisoner's rental car. Even though the car was found without a license plate, the excuse was solely used because he was suspicious of the investigation which Finley and Roscoe did. Even though Jack had punched Kleiner Jr., he survived the lawsuit because Kleiner didn't want a trial that would give Jack a chance to defend himself. If that happened, Jack would take advantage of the employee list and financial books at Kleiner Industries. While waiting for the return of the lecturers from Europe, Jack remembered the files or diaries that might have been left behind by Roscoe's late adoptive father. Jack went back to checking the box of weapons given by Gray. From the box, he found a hidden mini drawer that contained a key. The question, what is the key to open for? From Roscoe's story, apart from the police station and her house, once a week, the bald-headed Gray often visited Mosley's barber shop. Their guess was correct. Mosley kept a large box left by Gray that was entrusted to him. In that note, Jack returned to discussing his cattle ranch belonged to Kleiner with a total of 116 cows, but the amount of feed is much larger. Even though she was tired of hearing Jack's story, Roscoe remembered her uncle who had 120 cows that had to be reported to the state. According to Jack's assessment, Kleiner deliberately owned 116 cows to avoid inspection and required reporting of the amount set by the government. The big question, what is that much feed for? Continue. Gray, who carefully kept this SPT file, was similar to a complete forensic accounting. There was money spent, but it didn't match the income stream. All this time, Kleiner had bribed almost all of the Margrave's residents for his covert business. The next question, why did Kleiner make the city of Margrave his business center? Jack then pinpointed the Margrave's location on a map perfect for a distribution center. The old state route arterial system passed here, their trucks easily picking federal interstate lines and away from police radar. Why did Kleiner have to destroy evidence and kill secret agents? Finley assumes the Coast Guard blockade put in place prevented counterfeit money from getting to America for a year. It means there was a huge backlog of assets they had overseas that made their entire operation vulnerable. They suspect that the money will be used to buy something very dangerous, or want to disrupt the American economy or countries that use dollars, for example Panama, which is one of the centers of world trade that is passed every year. From one of Gray's diaries, Roscoe found evidence that her adoptive father was killed not by suicide as she knew all along. Jack and Joe as children, accompanied by their parents and told to apologize to the general's son. When Joe, after saying his apology, Jack remained stubborn because he was sure that what he did were not wrong. Jack bravely said that Curtis should have taken a worse beating and he refused to apologize. Needily called Jack saying the sentence "wanna have dinner at 22, but instead ate at 18. This code 10 and 6 means sending the civil police, meaning that she finds important things and doesn't want to discuss carelessly. To find Needily, he has his own tricks. Jack went straight to Memphis. Needily would avoid tourist shopping for privacy, meaning not around Beale Street or around the university. Due to her older age it would stand out. Besides, to save money, Jack guessed Neagley would not staying in a 5-star hotel, but an ordinary hotel. A restaurant close to public transportation would be an option for the lunch menu. Sure enough, it turns out that Neagley was there. But in fact, all of Jack's guesses were wrong, because Neagley was the one who discovered his whereabouts. After 10 years of serving as a general investigator, Neagley could already guess Jack's way of thinking. She had quite a lot of money, because now Neagley works in the private sector, enough to stay in 5-star hotels. While walking in a city park, Jack actually worried about the parabolic microphone used enemies to spy on him. Neagley gets information that the initials JW who are on Joe's list are EPA investigators named Jimmy Dupree Wilkes, who was shot and dead at his home. The FBI stepped in to determine the case as an ordinary robbery that failed. With a subsonic 9mm small-time murder weapon, even strangely, the victim's body was still beaten afterwards. Jack was surprised that the case was exactly the same what happened to Joe. The clue was in a Memphis policeman named O'Coin, who handled the case of the murder of Agent Jimmy Wilk before being taken over by the FBI. Also, they plan to meet with an informant who may know the mastermind behind Wilk's murder. The case has to do with the level of toxic pollution in Mississippi. Neagley tells Jack to be careful because these people have connections and a ruthless mafia killer. Roscoe asks her partner again to show photo of Gray's body, which was identified as dead, fell, and his head hit the chair when he was about to kill himself. Roscoe suspected that her adoptive father had died as a result of being hit by a hard object. When she zoomed in, a pattern of wounds on his head was seen exactly with diamonds. Jack and Neagley met their informant. According to him, this water pollution was caused by a rich company called Clarin Chemical. It turns out that the company was disbanded, and you can guess who was the big boss company was. Yes, it was Kleiner Industries. After destroying Chester, they moved to Margrave. Jack suspected Kleiner had killed Wilkes, then killed Joe. Before pollution they result is revealed. Next, that they went to meet O'Coin. Without wasting time, Roscoe immediately threw a punch at the corrupt policeman's face. Not without reason, the diamond stick that he always carried was used to kill Gray. Finley, who was shocked when he saw her, immediately took Roscoe out of town for her safety. That night, Jack and Neagley meet with Agent O'Coin and his partner Ribideau. The four of them plan to meet an informant who is willing to talk about the involvement of federal agents, but apparently, Ribideau doesn't like his partner's act of reopening the case. At a nightclub, the informant says that he doesn't know the federal agent's real name, but the nickname is Viking. Finley places Roscoe in a motel outside the town, because Teal has ordered Roscoe's arrest. After that, she will take Picord's place to look after Charlie and the kids. Actually, Roscoe needed Jack to be by her side, but, because of this investigation for the time being, they couldn't meet. One thing Roscoe asked Jack, before this was over, give her a chance to beat up the mayor again. Neagley only smiled when she heard Jack's conversation with Roscoe. Neagley could already guess that if Roscoe was a woman that Jack liked. Suddenly, something unexpected happened. When Ribideaux pointed his gun at O'Coin, the police seemed scared. The criminals would chase him too, and suddenly the gun went off and killed his own friend. Before being the next target, this is what Jack and Neagley did. The car fell into the river. Luckily, Jack and Neagley managed to get out. Because it was wet, it wasn't difficult for them also to get used clothes and a trash can. Jack will return to the Margrave, while Neagley will continue her investigation in Memphis to find out about the Vikings. At the same night, Finley infiltrates the Kleiner company to find files or evidence of their crimes. Unexpectedly, what he found turned out to be Kleiner, who had died covered in blood on his chair. It meant that the mastermind of this crime mafia was not Kleiner. As they suspected, there was someone more powerful. The question was, who was that figure? Finley shows Jack the photo of Kleiner's death. According to Jack, the incision in his neck is called the Venezuelan butterfly. The victim will experience shortness of breath and bleed out at the same time. Finley suspects that if Kleiner had Venezuelans working with him or for him, what is clear, the perpetrators were not happy with the chaos that was happening, and absolutely it was very influential. All this time they suspected Kleiner was the biggest boss of this case. Jack actually once said to Finley, "Don't kill a fierce dog if you have a spare dog that is just as evil." It seems they both have to work hard to uncover the brains of all this. Finley then came to the police station and pretended to have just found out about this news. Teal gave him an order to investigate the Kleiner murder case and set aside the Morrison case. When Finley was about to leave, suddenly Kleiner Jr. appeared intending to attack him. That was happened because before Finley accuses Kleiner of being the perpetrator of the crime, although Finley could indict him, he forgives Kleiner Jr. Given the circumstances, the mayor finally changed his decision to give this case by giving leave to Finley. Meanwhile, Jack came to a repair shop to cover his window. The repair shop owner asked for 3 days later. Jack gave him replacement money so he could use his car for a while. While waiting for Jack to arrive, Finley gives some tomatoes to Mosley. Finley asks Mosley's reason for sticking around amidst the serial killings that are going on in the Margrave. Born in this land of his birth, which was much older than the Teal family and also Kleiner, this old man chose to die in his own city. Mosley asked back, why did this Harvard University graduate want to work in a small town like Margrave, which is far from the center of life of American citizen? Not wanting to tell his personal story, Finley replies that it's none of his business. At the safe house, Picard takes Roscoe to be assigned to look after Charlie and the children. Before leaving, Picard reminds Charlie to carry out security and rescue procedures in case something happens, such as lock both doors without lamp while sleeping and never use the fireplace. From the top of the hill, Jack and Finley conducted reconnaissance of Kleiner's factory. Finley as usual playing with his wedding ring even though he was divorced, with his words chuckling and teasing each other. Jack told him that if he and Neagley served together in the 110 Army, his superiors allowed him to form a unit special investigation with a total of 9 personnel as the person in charge. The Pentagon underestimated his ability, even though their mission was successful. After officially leading the Marines, Jack lost contact with his colleagues. It was Finley's turn to vent, and in fact he wasn't divorced, but his wife died due to an illness. Jack was quite surprised because Finley never corrected if his accusations were wrong. Finley adhered to the principle of not wanting the pity of others, was called a man who was very angry, stubborn, a jerk, and it sucks to assume people would suspect if his wife left him. The city of Boston became such a fond memory of his wife. One thing he will never forget, namely paying the phone bill to be able to hear her voice on voicemail. Jack deduced the reason Finley lived over the tobacco shop while trying to quit smoking, then tweed one summer in Georgia and finally took a job in the middle of nowhere. This all he did as penance for failing to save his wife. Shortly, they saw Kleiner's nephew climbing onto the truck. They suspected he was going to send counterfeit money that was dwindling due to the Coast Guard's blockade. At the safe house, Roscoe tells about her parents who died in an accident when she was a child. Miraculously, Roscoe, who was in the back seat, survived from the accident. When she looked out the window, Roscoe saw a flashing flashlight, which meant that someone was watching them. Roscoe orders Charlie and the children to flee into the woods immediately if she screams. Meanwhile, Finley and Jack follow the truck all the way to Tennessee. Roscoe's attempt to catch the 2 assassins stalking her fails after her foot steps on a branch. As a result, Roscoe ran as hard as she could, then shouted a warning to Charlie. A gun battle ensued until Roscoe managed to shoot one of the perpetrators in the leg. It was seen that another perpetrator was preparing a grenade. For the second time, Roscoe managed to prevent it. The perpetrator had difficulty seeing, and finally this happened. Arriving at a motel, Finley and Jack get a chance to check the contents of the truck when the driver and motel clerk are asleep, because the roof of the truck is made of thin vinyl, easily hollowing the holes. Feeling that something was wrong, Kleiner's nephew came out of the motel to check on things. Fortunately, their actions were not discovered, but the problem was that the truck was empty. Jack remembered the 2 lecturers who should have arrived in America. One of the lecturers named Professor William Bryant, whom he contacted, but unexpectedly, his assistant who answered the phone said the professor had been killed this morning. Jack immediately contacted the second lecturer, namely Professor Castillo. After mentioning himself to be the younger brother of Joe she worked with, Jack directs the professor to follow his lead if she wants to stay alive. In the morning, Roscoe invited Charlie and her 2 children to continue the journey down the tree to the middle of town to meet Picard. Because one of her children was sprained, Roscoe then carried her. Meanwhile, Jack had plans to meet Professor Castillo in a location that was definitely very safe. Shortly, Roscoe had arrived at a tavern, treated Charlie's daughter's feet with ice cubes. Here, Roscoe told Charlie's that her husband had lied. More than a year Hubble had left Axis Financial. Strangely, Charlie was not surprised. She already knew that Hubble is involved with Kleiner, but for reasons to protect their family, Charlie keeps this secret from everyone, including Roscoe and her team. At that time, Hubble was so excited when he was called by Kleiner. He needed someone who was an expert to move currency as he usually did at the bank. Kleiner explained that if his company had a large client in Venezuela, Hubble was invited to go there to study operations and how it works, including their corporate culture. With such a colossal fee, Hubble would be tempted. Shortly, Hubble was invited to Venezuela. He managed to do his job to move the currency well. Kleiner was very satisfied. Moreover, 100% it was done legally. Because of Hubble's ability, Kleiner offered him a salary 4 times his current salary plus a year-end bonus of 50% on a ranch that specializes in breeding very fast champion horses. And also here, Kleiner tells Hubble that the work he's been doing is actually illegal, because every cent of every dollar is linked to international counterfeiting schemes. Here Kleiner also admits that he printed counterfeit money. In conclusion, Hubble has helped Kleiner launder millions of dollars in illegal tenders. Proof of the transaction along with the email IP address and the results of Hubble's work can be used as a basis if he is now involved. Instead of being jailed for 30 years, Hubble does not have choice but to follow Kleiner's orders. Hubble was locked up in a stable. At that night Hubble was shocked when Kleiner's men dragged a man to be beheaded and castrated for going against Kleiner's orders. From that story, Roscoe now knows that Kleiner is a very bad person. Not long after that, Picard comes to pick them up. Like Picard, Roscoe was surprised because the enemy could detect the location of this hideout. Do his trip by taxi. Jack went back to reading the clue paper left by Joe. The sentence "Jobling's garage, Kleiner Gray's file" became a big sign for him. This taxi driver called his girlfriend. With his Spanish, he called Jack a giant who spent the back seat. This taxi driver did not realize that Jack mastered the language. This driver was immediately scared. Jack then looked for a suit that was big enough for his size. Again, he was ridiculed because his size could consume a lot of cloth. It was seen that someone was watching when Jack was about to enter the police station. Entering the police station, Jack saw several officers who he would choose will be believable. Some are eating hot dogs with gusto. It's like the police are corrupt. Some are on the phone with their feet on the table. That means he's an arrogant detective. Looks like Jack found the right person when he saw the type of shoes used by this policeman. Jack claimed to be a lawyer to the police named Diaz. Jack wanted to meet his client Stephanie Castillo, who was under protection status because her life, was threatened. Jack finally was able to meet Professor Castillo, who told him to have worked with Joe in recent years. Joe needs the expertise of the two lecturers, because this is related to international and domestic monetary policy. Only the two of them are academics in America with a specialization in the theoretical effect of PMTT, namely counterfeiting that is not detected on a global economic scale. This big and organized crime is no joke. In fact, 80% of the existing American currency is in $100 bills, not in the country but overseas, to be precise the underground economy, drugs, weapons, and human trafficking. The reason is, the US currency is much more stable and acts as a reserve against other currencies. No one is looking for fake Ugandan shillings. The $100 bill is the holy grail of counterfeiters. If counterfeit money is good enough, it is called a super bill. Professor said an example of the government North Korea has a special ministry to produce it, with certain holograms and dye safety features making it impossible to fake it. But it will be same if the perpetrator has the talent and determination. All of that can be copied. The key is paper. Through his operations, Joe made it impossible to get the paper. Only one company has the legal authority to produce special paper for American money. Joe finds one company that is reckless producing the paper notes in Georgia. It was then that Jack began to realize that Kleiner Industries was producing counterfeit notes to be sent to Venezuela. Not the other way around as he thought before. Jack had to go, but he asked Prof to take shelter in this police station until Jack told her. He promised to find the perpetrator's boss and teach him or her a very painful lesson. Left the room. Jack immediately asked Diaz, which military branch did he come from? Jack could guess that because the sergeant's shoes were tied with ladder straps, pants with military ends, cuffs right up to the middle of the wrist bone, he claimed to be from the Army with the rank of first lieutenant. Jack revealed his true identity as a retired Marine with the rank of Major from Special Investigations 110. Jack is not a lawyer but wants to do the right thing. After 2 federal agents and several police and civilians were killed, including his brother who worked in the Secret Service, Jack specifically asked Sergeant Diaz to protect Professor Castillo, because in this case, she is in danger. As a soldier, Sergeant Diaz is willing to do it. Came out of the police station, Jack realized someone was following him. Jack immediately ran into a deserted alley. At that location, Jack immediately trapped him. In that fight, Jack's stomach was cut by the perpetrator's knife, and finally Jack managed to kill him. Never mess up with this retired Marine. It is shown that Stevenson and his wife are at home. The serial murder case that occurs makes Stevenson's wife afraid. She even asks Stevenson to leave this city. The reason makes his sense, because the victims are people around them such as superiors and their own relatives, without they knowing it, for assassins with their trademark clothes came to kill them both. The scene moves to the airport of Atlanta, Georgia. It is enough interesting the shirt Jack uses that reads "My son flew to New York and I only got this ugly shirt." He recalled when his father was transferred to Germany. Jack and his brother had to move to a country they called very much boring. In fact, German people are very individualistic and rarely socialize. Fortunately, they both have a very loving and wise mother. Joe is rated as a person who is able to solve many problems with his brain, while Jack has 3 times the physical strength of other people. Shortly thereafter, Finley came to pick him up. Jack got a lot of information from Professor Castillo, including having to deal with blood again after killing a Venezuelan. Finley stopped by Kleiner's funeral. His intention was sincere as a form of respect as chief detective, even though Kleiner was wrong, one victim and part of a big mafia group. Kleiner Jr. dared to threaten and accuse Finley of being the killer of his uncle. Finley threatened this person back. If he didn't back down, there would be 2 Kleiners in the grave. Finley then took Jack to take his car back to the garage. Inside the workshop, Jack noticed a worker who was sprinkling cat litter for oil spills. Suddenly, Finley gets news of the death of Stevenson and his wife, in a vicious way, not much different from Morrison. According to Jack, even though the killers could be the same, the message was different. The way the killers did it, they didn't want Stevenson to shock, they wanted Stevenson to stay conscious. With the mirror around him, Stevenson was forced to see the torture that was being done to his wife. This evidence suggests that if Stevenson is not involved in corruption, Finley surmises, after Dawson finds a hole in his truck, he targets people around Finley and his team, who he can turn to as a source of information. In conclusion, Stevenson is an honest cop who is in the wrong place. Jack had a plan with inviting the last police lunch at the Margrave, namely Baker, as a true partner should be. Baker did not really have an appetite, but in fact, he was so voraciously enjoying his food. Jack did this drama to trap Baker, whom Jack suspected was involved with the killers. Jack pretended to only believe in Baker than the other police, the reason being, only him wasn't chased and fired by Teal. We can't even accuse Baker because in every incident Jack was always out of town. With valid evidence. As he knows, Joe is also a victim of this serial killer, seemed to assume he's stupid. Jack accuses Finley of being the perpetrator of this serial killer. All this time, Jack pretends to be Finley's friend to find his brother's killer. Jack seems to believe that Finley is the mastermind of all these killings. Tonight, Jack will come to Hubbell's house to look for evidence. If he has got the evidence, it will be handed over to Baker. This bait seems to work. After that meeting, Jack shopped for army equipment such as military armor, Rambo knives and special powder. Arriving at Hubbell's house, Jack immediately prepared himself for the attack that would come to him. In the midst of that rainy and stormy weather, sure enough, Dawson and 3 of his men came to Hubbell's house to kill Jack. After they entered, Jack's first step was to kill the driver. Feeling something was wrong, one perpetrator returned to the car. That's when Jack killed him again. Rambo Jack's knife stabbed the 3rd perpetrator who was unaware of Jack's appearance from behind. Dawson and 1 more of his men were left to kill. When Jack returned to do it again, Dawson immediately attacked Jack brutally. The 2 of them got into a fight until Jack and his gun were thrown into the pool. For a moment Jack almost drowned to death. Luckily, he regained consciousness and grabbed his gun. Jack finally succeeded in killing Dawson. Does that end this serial murder case? The case is decreasing, but the case is not finished because the leader of the perpetrator who has many connections has not been revealed. After getting the answer, Jack contacted Roscoe. Professor Castillo said the key to American currency is paper. So far, Joe has been unable to reveal the source of the paper. The crime they committed was to wipe the ink from the dollar bills and then they reprinted the paper as any denomination. With the skills he had, Hubbell's job was to provide Kleiner with an army of $1 banknotes because it was the lowest. The source came from a money-intensive industry that hides income, including from several other sources such as the casino and parking attendants. The piles of $1 bills were sent to the Margrave from all over. The chemical waste from this process destroys the Chester River, Mississippi. That's why they killed the EPA agent. Here is the answer: why is cat litter used to cover up oil spills? Because it contains diatomaceous earth, an absorbent coagulating agent used in pesticides for filters. The cow farm merely camouflages for the true crime of counterfeiting. Large quantities of animal feed are reprocessed to become an effective cleaning agent for chemical waste. The papers were washed, then dried and printed again into $100 bills. We can imagine the value of the profit they got from $1 banknotes to $100. The counterfeit dollar bills were considered genuine because they used real paper, but the old version was before the 1990s, so that there is no need to use magnetic protection like today's banknotes. The money was sent to Florida and then to Venezuela. Their next mission is to find strong enough evidence if Kleiner Industries is involved in counterfeiting this money. Roscoe, who was at Picard's house, and told him that Jack had succeeded in uncovering the case. Jack then contacted Finley to take him to Pete Jobling's house. Suddenly, Finley saw 3 hitmen who suspected were hunting him. Jack gave directions to Finley to escape from the murder. While preparing his gun, Finley describes the hotel room he is staying in to Jack. He concluded, if the dividing wall of this room uses thin panels made of Albasian plywood, while turning on the TV very loud, Finley destroys the wall then breaks through it to the next room. Thanks to Jack's help, Finley manages to escape an assassination attempt on him. In the morning, the 2 of them went to Jobling's house, which turned out to be burnt down. It was clear the perpetrator's goal was to destroy evidence that was most likely there. Jack told Finley that he had killed Dawson and 4 other people. When he reread Joe's letter, starting realizing that the meaning isn't to Pete Jobling Sr., Pete Jobling's parents after searching his garage, finding a box with a Kleiner stamp, and it turned out to be a $1 million counterfeit note. Jack orders Finley to call Picard and meet him at the ranch house where the Jaguar is. This evidence would be enough to bring down the Kleiner Foundation and Mayor Teal. Jack will bring this money to Bentley. While on the way, Jack gets important information from Neagley, a shooting case that killed an EPA agent, handled by an FBI agent named Nitmo. Nitmo, who states this case is only armed robbery. Neagley then investigates Nitmo, who turns out to have a fortune who is not normal. Nitmo is nicknamed as Viking, and in fact Nitmo had died 3 years ago from cancer. Nitmo's old colleague was still active in the FBI and is named Picard. Now it's clear that Picard is part of the mafia like Kleiner Jr. and the Mayor of Teal. It is revealed that the three main of the perpetrators of this international money counterfeiting crime are Kleiner Jr., Mayor Teal, and FBI agent Picard. Picard is willing to sacrifice his profession as a federal law enforcement officer for money. Kleiner then shows the video of Roscoe, Charlie, and her children being taken hostage. Jack had to obey him, otherwise, they would all meet the same fate as Morrison. Jack's task is to drag Paul Hubble to them. This former military police suspects that the counterfeit money they produced is settled due to the Coast Guard blockade. While their client in Venezuela has been waiting for the counterfeit money they have paid for a long time, here it is revealed that if the senior Kleiner died, it was not because of Venezuelans, but it was Kleiner Jr. who viciously slit his own father's throat. He thought his father was too afraid to protect this business, so he intended to close it down. Additionally, it was Kleiner who hired Picard's associates to assassinate EPA agents in Memphis, including killing Pete Jobling and Joe's girlfriend on the subway, and in fact he also killed Joe Reacher. Despite his rage, Jack tries to control his emotions. In conclusion, Kleiner, who had shot, and Dawson, who kicked him, seemed never satisfied. This psychopath and serial killer also killed the head of police, Morrison. His father began to lose control with the barbaric actions of his own son. Because of that, Kleiner Sr. planned to send him to a mental hospital, but he refused, just like his father had tried to do when he was a child. In conclusion, this person has been crazy since childhood. After is crazier. Mayor Teal plans to blame this case on the Joe Reacher brothers, who are working with the out-of-town police and a banker for illegal drug and weapons distribution. In addition, Reacher bribes local police who are immoral to attack each other. Picard will escort Jack when he commits a crime. Search for Hubble. It's only until tomorrow morning, otherwise, Roscoe, Charlie, and the kids will be killed. Shortly, Jack and Picard set off, with the excuse that he needed time to think. Jack visited his regular shop to order black coffee and peach pie, which he always failed to enjoy. After circling a map, Jack guessed if Hubble was in Augusta. The reason, Jack positioned himself as Hubble, who had to run away but also protect his family. Therefore, the location of his escape had to be far from the Margrave, but still within a few hours. Picard didn't want to just believe Jack's conclusion, and here, Jack could guess Picard's thoughts that planned to kill him, but with consideration of the best time and place. When the waiter served his order, the cup containing hot coffee was deliberately touched by Jack so that it spilled down Picard's pants. It was then that with a swift hand, Jack picked up his cake fork. Back in the car, Jack sinks the fork into his tires, and then they continue their journey towards Augusta, as Jack predicted. Meanwhile, Finley is badly beaten by Baker. At night, Jack has to pull over his car because the wind pressure sensor flashes red. Not wanting to be caught off guard, Picard will watch him while changing tires. When Jack opens the trunk door, this has happened. They both took cover beside the car holding their respective guns, because they both needed each other and didn't want to die. Picard asked Jack to both put down their guns. In a count of 3, Jack would put his gun in the trunk, but this happened.
2.
Picard was shot, but his body disappeared in a bush area. Jack continued his journey, and through the help of Google Maps, he found a motel within a 5-kilometer radius of the Augusta bus terminal. Shortly, Jack managed to find the hide place of Hubble. The scene moves to Kleiner Industries, where the mobsters are producing counterfeit American dollar bills. Mayor Teal moves Charlie's children into a room as a guarantee that their evil plan can run very well. One of the ways Jack found out where Hubble was, because he was sure Hubble would not use his credit card to travel, because his only option was the bus, and because he had limited cash, Hubble would stay in a cheap hotel under an assumed name after the Beatles' hobby, Harrison. Arriving at his house, Jack tells Hubble that there is a lot of blood, mud, and other things in his house. That's because Hubble's house has been a battlefield. Jack's goal there is to take the truck Dawson used to attack him. Back at the police station, Baker takes Finley's cell phone, because a message appears that says lay down and take cover. The meaning of the message is,
what the hell does that mean? Duck and cover.
This corrupt police officer died after being hit by a car. Finley then opens the heavy armory located in this police station. The climax of the Great War against the criminals is imminent. Not long after, came Neagley to help with this mission. At that night, the four of them gathered at Mosley's house. Because they had worked at Kleiner Industries for a long time, Hubble knew very well the ins and outs of the factory. After seeing the picture, Jack pointed out the possible location of Roscoe and Charlie being held hostage, while the Hubble children were deliberately separated because they were part of the psychic tactic to get Roscoe and Charlie to comply. At that night, they immediately moved to the location. With the sniper, Neagley would shoot guards from a distance. A gun was given to Hubble to protect and free his family. To surprise them, Jack prepared a gallon of petrol in this attack. And this is Neagley's first shot. Jake's turn to kill a guard who's suspicious with their movements. The gallon of gasoline is spilled and then Finley lights a cigarette for the last time in his life if he dies tonight. The big explosion shocked Kleiner Jr. and all of his men. A shootout could no longer be avoided. Neagley is tasked from above shooting enemies while protecting the team. Meanwhile, Jack and Finley kill them one by one in a close-range shootout. Hubble's first step was to save his two children. They are brought outside. A fierce battle ensues between Finley and the thugs. When the situation started to be safe, Jack opened the handcuffs that tied Roscoe in Charlie's hands. Then Jack's lover took Charlie out of the factory. From above, Neagley was met with fierce resistance from the enemy. Fortunately, Neagley managed to control the situation. Charlie managed to meet her children and her husband safely. Fierce battle reemerges between Finley and his former friend Picard, who turns out to be still alive. Likewise with Roscoe, who is hunting for Mayor Teal because it has been proven that he killed her adoptive father. Finley finally succeeds in killing this corrupt federal agent, as well as Roscoe, who is satisfied that she was able in completing her revenge. The team managed to get out of the counterfeit money factory, leaving Jack and his biggest enemy, Kleiner Jr. To distract Kleiner Jr., Jack unwrapped the fodder. When Kleiner was distracted, Jack immediately attacked him from behind. After going through a fierce battle, Jack succeeded in burning the leader of the perpetrators of the murder of his brother and dozens of other victims. Not long after, there was a big explosion. Luckily, Jack came out safely to be greeted by his girlfriend, Roscoe. Shortly after a night of making love, Jack reminisces about his past. Jack, who was on duty, was called by his brother Joe after hearing the news that his mother's illness was getting worse. Joe asked him not to cry in front of their mother. Because they were in Germany, his mother refused Joe's offer to undergo medical treatment to experts in the United States. For her, being able to see these two sons grow up to be a good person is more than enough. All this time, she knew that it was Jack who actually had hit Curtis when they were teenagers. Joe deliberately admitted that he did it to protect his younger brother. The seconds before her death, Reacher's mother gave him a war medal left by his grandfather as a symbol of courage in acting right. That's a memory. Jack was last with his mother, and for the first time Jack cried. In downtown of Margrave, Jack and Roscoe have one last talk, because Jack seems to have to disappear. The Central Police and the FBI will come to this city to ask him questions. Jack will choose to wander while Roscoe will build her hometown. Roscoe's personal phone number is given to Jack. Jack gives advice to Roscoe to run for mayor. Roscoe seems to agree, and after that they make love again. Meanwhile, Finley chose to adopt a dog that had been rescued by Jack. At the tavern, these two friends who had always fought agreed to leave the city, but their friendship would never be lost. Finley would return to Boston to continue his life again, because that was what his late wife wanted. The dog that he is going to bring was named Jack, and finally Jack got to actually enjoy a peach pie cake that actually tasted mediocre. The award medal Jack buried near where Joe's body was found, and Jack walked back to continue his wandering. And after that the movie is end.